Olivia Ramirez had always been the outsider in a world that valued speed and firepower above all else. At 33, she piloted a CH-47 Chinook helicopter, nicknamed the Whale by the sleek Apache pilots who dominated the prestigious 121st Combat Aviation Brigade. What they didn't know was that Captain Ramirez had spent 3 tours in Afghanistan, quietly setting records that remained buried in classified files. Her name systematically erased from mission reports that would have revealed her as the most accomplished heavy-lift pilot in modern combat history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain drummed steadily against the hangar roof as Olivia completed her post-flight checks on the massive dual-rotor Chinook. Unlike the Apache pilots who had support crews swarming around their aircraft, she worked methodically alone, her clipboard documenting every system with the precision that had kept her alive through over 2,000 combat flight hours. The other pilots had already left for the officers' club, their laughter fading across the tarmac as they joked about hauling furniture versus real combat flying. Fort Richardson Air Base sprawled across the Arizona desert, its training grounds considered the most demanding environment for helicopter pilots in the military. The base housed both attack and transport divisions, but the cultural divide between them couldn't have been more pronounced. Apache pilots wore their elite status like armor, while transport pilots like Olivia operated in their shadows, essential but overlooked in the hierarchy of military aviation. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The message was brief: Joint Operation Silverback approved. Report to Commander Jensen at 0700. Olivia's pulse quickened. Operation Silverback was the military's most prestigious combat training exercise, typically reserved for attack helicopter squadrons. Transport helicopters were usually relegated to support roles, ferrying supplies and personnel before the real action began. For a Chinook pilot to be included in the primary operation was unprecedented. In her sparse on-base apartment, Olivia kept few personal items, but the ones she did have told her story. A faded photograph of her father standing beside his own Chinook in Vietnam. A collection of technical manuals with handwritten notes filling every margin. And most precious of all, a worn leather flight journal documenting innovations in heavy transport operations that had never made it into official military doctrine, but had saved countless lives in combat zones across the Middle East. The desert stretched endlessly outside her window, punctuated by the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors as night training missions continued despite the late hour. Olivia opened her laptop and accessed a custom flight simulator she had programmed herself. While other pilots socialized, she had spent 5 years developing specialized maneuvers that pushed the Chinook beyond its supposed limitations. The simulator displayed complex wind patterns and terrain features, matching the exact conditions of Operation Silverback's notorious Devil's Canyon route. Major James Harlow's voice echoed in her memory from earlier that day. Try not to slow U.S. down too much, Ramirez. Silverback is about rapid deployment, not furniture delivery. The other Apache pilots had laughed, never questioning whether a Chinook could keep pace with their formations. Olivia's fingers moved across the simulator controls, executing a canyon descent maneuver that would have made even veteran Apache pilots queasy. At precisely 0700, Olivia stood outside Commander Jensen's office, her posture military perfect, her olive-green flight suit meticulously pressed. Unlike the personalized patches and insignia that decorated the Apache pilots' uniforms, Olivia's only distinguishing mark was a small faded blue star sewn onto her left sleeve, her father's 10th Mountain Division patch from his own days as a Chinook pilot. Enter, Commander Jensen's voice carried through the door. Inside, the commander was not alone. 5 Apache pilots sat in a semicircle, including Major Harlow, whose expression darkened when he saw Olivia. The wall behind them displayed the operation map, with the notoriously challenging Devil's Canyon clearly marked as the primary insertion point. Captain Ramirez, Commander Jensen nodded. I assume you're wondering why you've been included in Operation Silverback's forward element. He didn't wait for her response. The Pentagon has issued new directives requiring integration of heavy transport capabilities in advanced strike scenarios. In plain English, we need to prove that Chinooks can operate alongside Apaches in rapid deployment situations. Major Harlow scoffed. With all due respect, Commander, Chinooks are flying buses. They'll compromise our entire approach strategy. Jensen's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't write the orders, Major. I execute them. Captain Ramirez and her Chinook will participate in the forward element. End of discussion. The briefing continued with detailed mission parameters, but Olivia could feel the Apache pilot's resentment radiating toward her. To them, she represented an unwelcome complication in an operation designed to showcase their elite status. To her, this was the opportunity she had prepared for throughout her entire career. After the briefing, Lieutenant Rodriguez, the youngest of the Apache pilots, approached her. No offense, Captain, but have you ever even flown Devil's Canyon? The wind shears alone have washed out 4 Apache pilots in training exercises. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I've studied the approach thoroughly, Lieutenant. Studying isn't flying, Rodriguez replied. Those canyon walls don't care how many books you've read. What Olivia didn't say was that she had flown far worse than Devil's Canyon, mountain corridors in Afghanistan with active enemy fire, emergency, medical evacuations in zero visibility, extractions under heavy combat conditions. But those missions remained classified, her role minimized in official reports that prioritized combat operations over transport achievements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Back in the hangar, Olivia began methodical preparations on her Chinook. Where Apache mechanics swarmed over their aircraft, she worked primarily alone, having learned early in her career that self-sufficiency was the transport pilot's only reliable ally. Her movements were efficient, each inspection performed with the precision of someone who understood that in combat, overlooked details became fatal errors. Checking the furniture straps? Major Harlow's voice carried across the hangar. He stood with 3 other Apache pilots, all smirking. Make sure you can keep up tomorrow, Ramirez. Silverback isn't a moving company operation. Olivia continued her work without responding. She had learned long ago that proving herself happened in the air, not in hangars with peacetime pilots whose combat experience consisted primarily of training exercises with predefined parameters. That evening, while the Apache pilots gathered at the officers' club, Olivia sat in the base's flight simulation center, running scenario after scenario of the Devil's Canyon approach. The standard military protocols called for transport helicopters to maintain specific altitudes and speeds that Olivia knew would make her Chinook an easy target in real combat. Instead, she practiced variations that leveraged the Chinook's unique dual-rotor system for maneuverability, patterns that defied conventional wisdom about what a heavy transport helicopter could do. The base grew quiet as midnight approached. Olivia finally left the simulation center, crossing the darkened tarmac where her Chinook waited in the moonlight. Unlike the sleek, predatory silhouettes of the Apaches nearby, the Chinook's bulky profile earned it little respect from pilots who valued speed over capacity. But Olivia saw beyond the superficial. She understood what few attack pilots ever bothered to learn, that in actual combat zones, the Chinook's versatility often meant the difference between mission success and failure. In her apartment, Olivia opened her father's flight journal, reading entries from his Vietnam tours. "They don't understand what we do," he had written. "Attack pilots get the glory, but transport pilots bring everyone home. He had died when Olivia was 15. His Chinook brought down during a nighttime medical evacuation in Kosovo. The official report cited pilot error in challenging conditions, but the full mission details remained classified. That ambiguity had driven Olivia to become not just a pilot, but a master of her craft, determined to redefine what heavy transport aviation could accomplish. Dawn broke over Fort Richardson with crystal clarity, the desert air still cool before. The punishing heat would rise. Operation Silverback would commence at 0900, with 8 Apache helicopters and Olivia's lone Chinook executing a coordinated approach through Devil's Canyon to a mock hostile landing zone. Success would be measured by speed, precision, and adaptability to changing tactical situations. In the pre-mission briefing, Major Harlow made a final attempt to sideline Olivia. "Commander, I must formally request that the Chinook maintain a secondary approach vector. Its presence in the forward element compromises our maneuverability." Commander Jensen reviewed the request with apparent consideration before responding. "Request denied, Major. Captain Ramirez and her Chinook will maintain position in the formation as planned. This exercise tests our ability to integrate all aviation assets effectively." Harlow's jaw tightened, but he offered a crisp "yes, sir," before returning to his seat. As the pilots dispersed to their aircraft, Lieutenant Rodriguez caught up with Olivia. Unlike the others, his expression held more curiosity than disdain. "Captain, I've never seen a Chinook fly Devil's Canyon. How do you plan to handle the crosswinds?" At junction point, Olivia appreciated the genuine question. "The Chinook's dual rotors actually provide stability advantages in certain wind conditions, Lieutenant. It's counterintuitive, but the mass can be leveraged effectively." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Good luck out there, Captain." It wasn't friendship, but it was the first acknowledgement from any Apache pilot that she might actually know what she was doing. Pre-flight checks complete, Olivia settled into the Chinook's cockpit, running through her mental checklist one final time. Her co-pilot, Warrant Officer Chun, was one of the few people who had witnessed Olivia's true capabilities. They had flown together in Afghanistan, where Chun had seen Olivia execute maneuvers that defied the Chinook's supposed limitations. "They have no idea what they're about to see, do they, Captain?" Chun asked quietly as they completed their startup sequence. Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "Let's just focus on executing the mission, Chun." The radio crackled with Major Harlow's voice. "All units, this is Striker Lead. Maintain tight formation until waypoint Alpha, then transition to Canyon. Approach pattern, Chinook." There was a slight pause. "Try to keep up." Olivia keyed her mic. "Striker Lead, this is Heavy One. Acknowledged." 8 Apaches lifted off in perfect formation, their sleek profiles cutting through the morning air with predatory grace. Olivia brought the massive Chinook up last, its dual rotors generating distinctive rhythmic beats that contrasted with the sharper sound of the attack helicopters. As they formed up for the approach to Devil's Canyon, she could almost feel the Apache pilot's expectations that she would lag behind, becoming the operation's limiting factor. What happened next would change the perception of heavy transport aviation at Fort Richardson permanently. As the formation approached Devil's Canyon, the lead Apaches began their descent into the winding terrain. The canyon was notorious for unpredictable wind patterns that created dangerous turbulence, especially at the narrow section known as Junction Point. Olivia watched as the first Apache encountered the turbulence, its nimble frame adjusting rapidly to maintain course. "Heavy One, reduce speed and maintain higher altitude through the junction," Major Harlow ordered over the radio. "Repeat, stay above the turbulence layer." It was the standard protocol for transport helicopters. Avoid the complex flying and take the safer, slower route. But Olivia had different plans. "Negative, Striker Lead," she responded calmly. "Heavy One will maintain formation position and altitude." There was a pause before Harlow's voice returned, tighter now. "Heavy one, that is not advisable. Your aircraft cannot handle the junction conditions." "Respectfully, sir, it can," Olivia replied, then focused completely on the approach. As the Chinook entered the canyon proper, Olivia engaged the technique she had perfected over years of combat flying and countless simulation hours. Rather than fighting the turbulence, she used the Chinook's weight and dual-rotor system to ride the air currents, making minute adjustments that allowed the massive helicopter to flow through the canyon with surprising grace. Through her headset, she could hear the Apache pilots' chatter fall silent as they observed the Chinook not only keeping pace, but actually anticipating the canyon's notorious wind shifts. At junction point, where the canyon narrowed dramatically and the crosswinds intensified, Olivia executed a maneuver that no training manual would have recommended for a Chinook, a deliberate bank that positioned the helicopter to slice through the turbulence rather than be buffeted by it. "What the hell was that?" one of the Apache pilots exclaimed over the channel. Emerging from junction point, Olivia's Chinook hadn't just kept up with the formation, it had maintained optimal position throughout the most challenging section of the approach. As they cleared the canyon and approached the mock landing zone, she could sense the shift in the Apache pilot's perception. Surprise had replaced dismissal. The operation continued with a series of tactical scenarios designed to test responsiveness and adaptability. In each case, Olivia demonstrated maneuvers with the Chinook that contradicted everything the attack pilots had been taught about heavy transport limitations. When the exercise called for rapid repositioning under simulated enemy fire, she executed a near-vertical climb that leveraged the Chinook's powerful engines in ways that standard protocols explicitly advised against. By the time the formation returned to Fort Richardson, the dynamic had visibly shifted. As Olivia completed her shutdown procedures, she noticed a cluster of Apache pilots gathering near her helicopter, their expressions a mixture of confusion and reluctant respect. Major Harlow approached as she exited the cockpit. "Where did you learn to fly like that, Ramirez?" His tone carried accusation rather than admiration, as though she had somehow cheated during the exercise. "Experience, sir," she answered simply. "No standard training teaches those maneuvers for a Chinook," he pressed. "No, sir, it doesn't." Before Harlow could continue, Commander Jensen strode across the tarmac. "Outstanding work out there, Captain. Ramirez, I'd like to see you in my office once you've completed your post-flight procedures." Olivia nodded. "Yes, sir." 30 minutes. As the commander walked away, Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward from the group of Apache pilots. "Captain, that bank you executed at junction point, that's not supposed to be possible in a Chinook. How did you compensate for the torque differential?" For the first time, Olivia saw genuine professional curiosity rather than dismissal. "It's about understanding how to work with the aircraft's mass rather than against it, Lieutenant. The Chinook's dual rotors give you options that aren't in the manual if you know how to use them." In Commander Jensen's office, Olivia stood at attention, her posture revealing nothing of the satisfaction she felt after the morning's exercise. The commander studied her silently for a moment before speaking. "At ease, Captain," he finally said, gesturing to a chair. "That was impressive flying today. Not standard protocol for a Chinook, was it?" "No, sir." "I thought not." Jensen opened a folder on his desk. "I've been reviewing your service record, Ramirez. It's remarkably incomplete." Olivia remained silent. She knew exactly what he meant. Her official record showed competent but unremarkable service, 3 combat tours, STANDARD commendations, nothing that would explain the level of skill she had demonstrated today. "What's curious," Jensen continued, "is that I made some calls. After selecting you for Silverback, called in some favors with contacts at Central Command." He slid a different folder across the desk. "This arrived by secure courier this morning." Olivia glanced at the folder. It was marked with classified designations she hadn't seen since her last deployment. "Open it," Jensen instructed. Inside was a different service record, one that documented missions that officially never happened, extractions from deep behind, enemy lines, medical evacuations under extreme combat conditions, and tactical transport operations that had directly supported high-value Special Forces objectives. In this record, Olivia Ramirez wasn't just a transport pilot. She was recognized as the architect of revolutionary heavy-lift combat maneuvers that had changed operational outcomes in multiple theaters. Care to explain the discrepancy, Captain? Olivia chose her words carefully. Special operations requirements. Sir, my role was considered supporting infrastructure rather than primary operational value. Jensen's eyebrows rose. Supporting infrastructure. You extracted a 12-man Special Forces team from a hot LZ under heavy fire after 3 Apache gunships deemed the approach too dangerous. That operation isn't taught at the academy because officially, it never happened. The mission parameters required adaptive response, sir. Adaptive response, Jensen repeated. That's one way to describe flying a Chinook through a mountain. Pass in a snowstorm with zero visibility while taking heavy fire. He closed the folder. Why are you still flying standard transport rotations, Captain? With this record, you should be leading specialized training programs at minimum. The question struck at the heart of frustrations Olivia had carried silently for years. Transport pilots don't get those assignments, sir. Our contributions are considered logistical, not tactical. That's bureaucratic nonsense. Yes, sir, it is. Jensen leaned back in his chair. Well, things are about to change, Captain. Operation Silverback isn't just an exercise. It's the preliminary phase of a new joint operations program integrating heavy transport directly into forward combat elements. We need pilots who can push the capabilities of their aircraft beyond conventional limitations. He paused. Pilots like you. Olivia felt a surge of vindication that she kept carefully hidden behind her professional demeanor. I'm interested, sir. Good. Because you've just been reassigned as the Chinook integration specialist for the program. You'll work directly with the Apache squadron to develop new joint operational protocols. Jensen couldn't quite suppress a smile. Major Harlow will be your primary liaison. Olivia maintained her composure, but internally she processed the implications. Harlow, the most vocal critic of transport pilots, would now be required to work with her as an equal. When do I start, sir? Immediately. There's a full briefing for all program pilots at 0800 tomorrow. I suggest you prepare for resistance. Captain, you're disrupting a deeply entrenched hierarchy. I understand, sir. As Olivia left the commander's office, she could feel the weight of what lay ahead. For years, her innovations and contributions had been buried in classified files, her expertise dismissed because of the aircraft she flew. Now she had a chance to reshape the very foundations of combat aviation integration, if she could overcome the systemic biases that had relegated transport pilots to second-class status. The following morning, Olivia arrived at the briefing room 15 minutes early, deliberately choosing a seat at the center of the conference table rather than the periphery, where transport pilots typically positioned themselves. One by one, the Apache pilots filtered in, their expressions shifting to surprise when they saw her placement. Major Harlow was the last to arrive, his face darkening when he noticed Olivia's central position. Commander Jensen began without preamble. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first official briefing of the Integrated Tactical Aviation Program. ITAP represents a fundamental shift in our approach to combat aviation. Instead of segregating attack and transport operations, we'll be developing synchronized protocols that leverage the unique capabilities of each aircraft type. He nodded toward Olivia. Captain Ramirez will serve as our Chinook integration specialist. working directly with Major Harlow to develop these new operational standards. The room fell silent. Harlow's jaw visibly tightened. "Sir," he finally said, "with all due respect, combat integration protocols should be developed by pilots with comprehensive tactical experience. Captain Ramirez is a transport pilot." Jensen's expression remained neutral. "Major Harlow, I understand your concern. However, Captain Ramirez brings specialized expertise that will be essential to this program's success." "What expertise would that be, sir?" Harlow pressed. "Moving equipment from point A to point B?" Before Jensen could respond, Olivia spoke. "Actually, Major, I specialize in adaptive tactical maneuvering in contested environments. My focus has been integrating heavy transport capabilities into high-risk combat scenarios where conventional wisdom would consider such integration impossible." Harlow's expression was dismissive. "And where exactly did you develop this specialty?" "Captain, hauling supplies to forward operating bases." Commander Jensen intervened. "Major, Captain Ramirez's complete operational history is classified above your current clearance level. Trust that she is uniquely qualified for this position." The statement hung in the air, creating a ripple of murmurs among the Apache pilots. Classified operations above a major's clearance level weren't routine transport missions. Jensen continued the briefing, outlining the program's objectives and the upcoming training schedule. Throughout the presentation, Olivia could feel the Apache pilots reassessing her, their perception shifting from dismissal to cautious curiosity. Only Harlow maintained his open skepticism, his body language radiating resistance to the entire concept. After the briefing, Lieutenant Rodriguez approached Olivia as she gathered her materials. "Captain, I'd like to understand more about these integrated tactics you've developed. Maybe we could compare notes on the canyon approach techniques." Before Olivia could respond, Harlow interrupted. "Lieutenant, don't waste your time. Whatever classified missions the captain may have participated in, they don't translate to our operational requirements." "With respect, sir," Rodriguez replied. "After what I saw yesterday, I think there's value in understanding her methodology." Harlow's expression hardened. "Understood, Lieutenant. Just remember that this program will be evaluated on combat effectiveness, not transport accommodation." He turned to Olivia. "My office, 1300 hours, Captain. Since we're required to collaborate, we might as well start immediately." As Harlow walked away, Rodriguez shook his head. "Don't mind the Major, Captain. He's just traditional in his thinking." "I've encountered traditional thinking throughout my career, Lieutenant," Olivia replied evenly. "It rarely survives contact with actual combat conditions." At precisely 1300 hours, Olivia knocked on Major Harlow's office door. The space reflected its occupant, meticulously organized, with display cases highlighting his numerous commendations, and a prominent photograph of Harlow standing beside his Apache. "Enter," he called, not looking up from his computer. "Take a seat, Captain." Olivia remained standing. "I prefer to stand for now, sir." That got his attention. Harlow looked up, his expression calculating. "As you wish. Let's get straight to the point. This program is clearly a Pentagon diversity initiative, and we both know it's not going to change fundamental combat aviation doctrine. Chinooks are support aircraft. They're not designed for the tactical environment where Apaches operate. With respect, Major, that assessment is outdated and tactically limiting." Harlow leaned back in his chair. "Is it? Chinooks are slower, less maneuverable, and more vulnerable than attack helicopters. Those aren't opinions, Captain. They're design specifications. Specifications that describe the aircraft, not their operational potential," Olivia countered. "A Chinook can deliver 3 times the firepower of an Apache in a single transport, can evacuate wounded while maintaining combat operations, and can establish forward arming and refueling points in contested zones that extend attack helicopter operational range by over 40%. On paper, perhaps, In actual combat, Olivia interrupted. I've executed over 30 high-risk extractions in zones declared too dangerous for attack helicopter approach. I've delivered special forces teams into positions that were considered inaccessible by conventional means. And I've developed stabilization techniques that allow precision operations in environmental conditions that ground most other aircraft. Harlow studied her for a long moment. Prove it. Excuse me? Prove it, he repeated. Not in an exercise with predictable parameters. Show me what you can do in a real stress test, with my pilots creating the combat conditions. A challenging smile appeared. Unless you're concerned about your Chinook keeping up. Olivia recognized the trap but also the opportunity. Name the scenario, Major. The Mountain Shadow course. Full combat simulation, no pre-briefing on enemy positions or environmental conditions. My Apache team against your Chinook. If you can complete the objectives while keeping pace with our operations, I'll reconsider my position. The Mountain Shadow course was the most demanding tactical training scenario at Fort Richardson, typically reserved for advanced Apache qualification. No Chinook had ever been certified on the course. Agreed, Olivia said without hesitation. When? Tomorrow, 0900, I'll arrange the clearances. Harlow's confidence was evident. And Captain, bring your best game. My pilots won't be holding back to accommodate your furniture mover. That evening, Olivia sat in her apartment, reviewing everything she knew about the Mountain Shadow course. The official parameters were challenging enough. A winding route through mountainous terrain with simulated enemy positions, requiring rapid response to changing tactical situations. But she suspected Harlow would add complications, pushing the scenario to its limits to prove his point about Chinook limitations. A knock at her door interrupted her preparation. Opening it revealed Lieutenant Rodriguez standing awkwardly in the hallway. Lieutenant, this is unexpected. Sorry to disturb you, Captain. May I come in? It's about tomorrow. Olivia hesitated, then stepped aside. Briefly, Rodriguez entered, his discomfort evident. I wanted to warn you. The Major has modified the Mountain Shadow parameters for tomorrow. He's added high-value target extraction under simulated enemy fire and a medical evacuation component with critical time constraints. He's trying to ensure the Chinook fails. Yes, ma'am. The scenario's designed to force you to choose between mission objectives that can't all be accomplished within the time frame using standard transport protocols. Olivia nodded slowly. Why are you telling me this, Lieutenant? Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Because it's not a fair test. And because after yesterday's exercise, I'm curious about what you actually can do. He paused. The Major doesn't know I'm here. I appreciate the information, but I'm not concerned, Olivia replied. Impossible situations requiring simultaneous objectives are standard in actual combat. Major Harlow is inadvertently creating exactly the conditions where integrated tactics prove most valuable. Rodriguez studied her with newfound respect. You really have done this before, haven't you? The classified operations. Let's just say tomorrow won't be my first impossible scenario, Lieutenant. She moved toward the door. And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare. After Rodriguez left, Olivia returned to her preparation with renewed focus. Harlow was creating a scenario designed to embarrass her, to prove definitively that Chinooks had no place in tactical combat operations. Instead, he was giving her the perfect opportunity to demonstrate precisely why they were essential. Dawn broke over Fort Richardson with high clouds promising turbulent conditions, ideal for Olivia's purposes. By 0830, she was completing pre-flight checks on her Chinook, methodically ensuring every system was optimized for the challenges ahead. Her co-pilot for the day, Warrant Officer Chun, worked alongside her with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. They've rigged the scenario, Chun. Olivia explained as they reviewed the flight systems. Multiple simultaneous objectives with contradictory requirements. Chun nodded. Just like Kandahar then. Exactly like Kandahar. At the pre-mission briefing, Major Harlow outlined the scenario with barely concealed satisfaction. The Mountain Shadow course has been modified to reflect real-world complexity. Primary objective is elimination of enemy anti-aircraft positions. Secondary objectives include extraction of a downed pilot and medical evacuation of wounded personnel. Time constraints are tight, reflecting actual combat conditions. He glanced at Olivia. Captain Ramirez has volunteered her Chinook for full integration in the tactical environment. Her aircraft will be expected to maintain operational tempo with the Apache squadron while contributing to mission objectives. The other pilots exchanged glances. Everyone understood what Harlow was doing, creating a scenario where the Chinook would either fall behind or fail to complete objectives, proving his point about the limitations of transport helicopters in tactical operations. Any questions? Harlow concluded. Just one, sir, Olivia said. Will you be evaluating integrated effectiveness or individual aircraft performance? Harlow's smile was thin. Both, Captain. That's the point of integration, isn't it? The Apache pilots proceeded to their aircraft, their confidence evident in relaxed postures and casual banter. In contrast, Olivia and Chun moved with focused precision, reviewing their approach one final time before boarding the Chinook. They think this is going to be embarrassing for us, Chun noted as they settled into the cockpit. It will be, Olivia replied, initiating the startup sequence. Just not for the reasons they expect. As the helicopters lifted off in formation, Olivia positioned her Chinook not at the rear where transport helicopters traditionally flew, but directly in the center of the Apache squadron. Through her headset, she heard Harlow's voice. Heavy. 1. Standard transport position is trailing the attack elements. Negative striker lead, Olivia responded calmly. For integrated operations, Heavy 1 will maintain central position for optimal tactical response. A pause then. Your funeral, Heavy 1. The formation proceeded toward the Mountain Shadow course, the rugged terrain already visible on the horizon. As they approached, Harlow's voice came through again. All units, enemy anti-aircraft positions identified at waypoints Bravo, Delta, and Echo. Downed pilot reported at waypoint Charlie. Medical evacuation required at waypoint Foxtrot. Time constraints require simultaneous engagement. Striker 2 through 4, take Bravo. 5 through 8, take Delta. I'll handle Echo. Heavy 1, do what you can. The dismissive tone was unmistakable. In the standard approach, the Chinook would need to wait until the enemy positions were neutralized before attempting either extraction, making it impossible to complete all objectives within the time constraints. It was a scenario designed to fail. Olivia keyed her mic. All striker elements, this is Heavy 1. Recommend revised approach. I will proceed directly to Charlie for pilot extraction, then to Foxtrot for medical evacuation. Request striker elements. Provide covering fire rather than direct engagement of anti-aircraft positions. Negative, Heavy 1, Harlow responded immediately. Standard protocol requires elimination of anti-aircraft threats before transport approach. Standard protocol wastes critical time and firepower, striker lead. The Chinook can absorb the simulated fire while completing primary extraction objectives. Silence followed as Harlow processed this challenge to established doctrine. Finally, your call, Heavy 1. But when you get shot down in the simulation, remember that in real combat, those would be actual lives lost. As the formation approached the course boundary, the Apache helicopters broke into their assigned attack patterns, moving with lethal precision toward the simulated enemy positions. Olivia, instead of hanging back, pushed the Chinook forward. At maximum speed, its dual rotors thundering as she executed a direct approach toward waypoint Charlie. Heavy 1. You have multiple enemy targeting systems locked on your position. The simulation controller announced over the radio. Recommend immediate evasive action. Negative control. Maintaining approach vector. In a standard scenario, this would indeed result in the Chinook being shot down in the simulation. But Olivia wasn't flying standard protocols. Instead of the expected evasive maneuvers, she initiated a series of unpredictable altitude variations while maintaining her direct course, a technique she had developed in actual combat that confused targeting systems while allowing the Chinook to maintain its approach speed. Heavy 1. Enemy targeting systems are struggling to maintain lock, the controller reported, surprise evident in his voice. Reduced hit probability. Reaching waypoint Charlie, Olivia executed a combat landing that leveraged the Chinook's unique capabilities rather than the standard approach. She used the aircraft's power to perform a near-vertical descent that minimized exposure time. Through the cockpit window, she could see the simulated downed pilot looking up in astonishment as the massive helicopter appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Extraction team deployed, Chen reported as their crew chief ran to retrieve the pilot. 30 seconds to retrieval. Olivia maintained the Chinook in a hover position that kept its profile minimized from the direction of the simulated enemy. Positions. Over the radio, she could hear the Apache pilots reporting their engagements, their tone shifting from confidence to confusion as they realized that Chinook was not only surviving but actively completing mission objectives. Downed pilot secured, Chun announced. Ready for departure. Instead of the standard vertical takeoff that would leave the Chinook vulnerable, Olivia initiated a rolling departure that kept the aircraft low to the ground using terrain features. For cover as she proceeded directly toward waypoint Foxtrot for the medical evacuation. Heavy 1, what is your status? Harlow's voice had lost some of its earlier condescension. Downed pilot secured. Proceeding to medical evacuation point, Olivia responded calmly. Recommend Striker elements consolidate fire on position Delta to clear approach corridor. There was a brief pause before Harlow responded. All Striker elements concentrate fire on Delta position as requested by Heavy 1. It was the first acknowledgement that the integrated approach Olivia had suggested might actually be working. As the Chinook approached waypoint Foxtrot, the Apache helicopters shifted their attack patterns to provide the covering fire she had requested, creating a temporary safe corridor for the medical evacuation. Once again, Olivia demonstrated combat techniques that contradicted conventional wisdom about Chinook operations. Rather than the standard medical evacuation procedure that called for a stable landing zone, she executed a hover-only extraction that kept the massive helicopter in constant motion, presenting a more difficult target while allowing the medical team to load the simulated casualties. Medical team and casualties secured, Chun reported. Extraction complete. All units, this is control, the simulation manager announced. All primary and secondary objectives achieved. Mission complete. Return to base for debriefing. As the formation reassembled for the return flight, Olivia could sense the shift in the Apache pilot's perception. What had begun as a scenario designed to prove the Chinook's limitations had instead demonstrated its essential role in integrated combat operations. The radio chatter reflected this new reality, with pilots discussing the tactical advantages they had observed rather than dismissing the transport helicopter's contributions. Major Harlow's voice came through last. Heavy 1, this is Striker Lead. That was unorthodox flying. Thank you, sir, Olivia responded. In actual combat, orthodoxy is often the first casualty. The debriefing room hummed with unusual energy as the pilots filed in, their typical post-mission banter replaced by animated technical discussions about what they had just witnessed. Olivia took her seat, maintaining her professional composure despite the vindication she felt. She had spent years developing the techniques she demonstrated today, often facing ridicule or dismissal when she proposed integrating them into standard protocols. Commander Jensen entered last, his expression revealing nothing as he took his position at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I've reviewed the preliminary data from today's exercise. Before we begin the formal debriefing, I'd like your immediate impressions of the integrated approach. Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke first. Sir, the Chinook's direct intervention allowed us to concentrate our firepower more effectively. We eliminated threats faster because we weren't dividing our resources to cover extraction operations. Captain Winters, another Apache pilot, nodded. The standard doctrine would have had us clearing all anti-aircraft positions before allowing transport approach. Captain Ramirez's method saved critical minutes and actually reduced our exposure time. Major Harlow remained silent, his expression unreadable as he studied the mission data on his tablet. Major Harlow, Jensen prompted, your assessment? All eyes turned to the squadron leader. He looked up slowly, his gaze fixing on Olivia before addressing the commander. The exercise demonstrated unexpected capabilities, he began carefully. Captain Ramirez employed techniques that contradict established transport protocols, but proved effective in the scenario parameters. He paused. I would need to see these methods applied in varied conditions before endorsing any doctrinal changes. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but coming from Harlow, it was significant acknowledgement. Olivia had expected nothing but continued resistance. Captain Ramirez, Jensen turned to her. Would you explain the theoretical foundation for your approach today? Many of these techniques aren't documented in any training materials I'm familiar with. Olivia stood, moving to the tactical display at the front of the room. The fundamental principle is integration rather than segregation of aviation assets. Traditional doctrine treats transport helicopters as vulnerabilities that must be protected by clearing operations before they can approach. This creates inherent delays and divides combat power. She brought up the mission data, highlighting the flight paths. By using specific approach vectors and altitude variations, a Chinook can minimize targeting effectiveness while completing critical extraction objectives. This allows attack helicopters to concentrate on enemy positions rather than splitting their focus. But a Chinook can't evade enemy fire like an Apache, Harlow interjected. The size alone makes it more vulnerable. Size creates different opportunities, Major, Olivia countered. A Chinook can absorb hits that would disable an Apache, can create larger targeting confusion with proper countermeasures, and can complete objectives even with systems compromised. In Kandahar, I once extracted a special forces team with hydraulic systems damaged and partial engine failure, conditions that would have grounded an attack helicopter completely. The room fell silent at this casual reference to what was clearly a harrowing combat experience. Harlow's eyes narrowed. Kandahar? That operation isn't in any briefing materials I've seen. No, sir, it wouldn't be, Olivia replied evenly. Commander Jensen intervened. The techniques Captain Ramirez is describing were developed during classified operations. Their effectiveness has been proven in actual combat conditions far more demanding than today's simulation. Harlow's expression shifted as he processed this information. You're saying these aren't theoretical concepts. They're battle-tested procedures. Exactly, Major, Jensen confirmed. Captain Ramirez isn't proposing experimental tactics. She's sharing proven methodologies that have simply been compartmentalized until now. The implications rippled through the room. The Apache pilots were reassessing not just the Chinook's capabilities, but Olivia herself. The transport pilot they had dismissed was apparently a combat veteran with experience beyond their own. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, that extraction technique you used at Waypoint Charlie, the modified vertical approach with the rolling departure, how does that work with active targeting systems? Olivia appreciated the genuine professional curiosity. The key is unpredictability within a predictable framework. Enemy targeting anticipates standard approach vectors. By maintaining the general approach direction but varying specific elements like descent rate and hover position, you create targeting difficulties without sacrificing arrival timeline. For the next hour, the debriefing transformed into a tactical discussion unlike any previous session at Fort Richardson. The Apache pilots asked increasingly technical questions about integrated operations, while Olivia explained concepts that bridge the artificial divide between attack and transport aviation. Only Harlow remained somewhat reserved, his contributions limited to occasional clarifying questions rather than enthusiastic participation. As the session concluded, Jensen made an announcement. Based on today's results, we're accelerating the ITAP implementation schedule. Beginning next week, we'll conduct a series of integrated exercises developing the techniques Captain Ramirez has demonstrated. Major Harlow and Captain Ramirez will co-lead the program development. Harlow's head snapped up. Co-lead, sir? That's correct, Major. This program requires expertise in both attack and transport operations. You and Captain Ramirez will work together to develop the protocols that may well redefine combat aviation doctrine. The commander's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion open for debate. As the briefing dismissed, Olivia gathered her materials, aware of Harlow's gaze following her movements. She had expected his resistance to intensify after today's demonstration, not diminish. His relative restraint during the debriefing suggested he was reassessing his position, but she harbored no illusions about sudden conversion. As she left the room, Rodriguez fell into step beside her. That was impressive flying today, Captain. I've never seen a Chinook move like that. Thank you, Lieutenant. It's what Chinooks are capable of with the right approach and proper understanding of their dynamics. I'd like to learn more about these integrated techniques. If you have time, maybe we could, Rodriguez. Major Harlow's voice cut through their conversation as he approached from behind. I need a moment with Captain Ramirez. Of course. Sir. Rodriguez nodded respectfully to them both before continuing down the hallway. Harlow waited until they were alone before speaking. My office, Captain. We need to discuss this co-leadership arrangement. Olivia followed him to his office, preparing for the confrontation she had expected since the debriefing announcement. Once inside, Harlow closed the door and moved behind his desk, the physical positioning an unconscious assertion of authority. Let me be direct, Captain, he began. Your flying today was exceptional. I won't deny that. But leading a program that will reshape combat doctrine requires more than skilled flying. It requires extensive tactical experience, strategic understanding, and institutional credibility. All of which I possess, Major, Olivia replied calmly. Though my record has been selectively documented, Harlow leaned forward. That's precisely my concern. These classified operations you've allegedly participated in, their convenient justifications for unorthodox methods that contradict established protocols. They're not alleged, Major. They happened. The protocols were developed in actual combat, tested against real enemy fire, and refined through operational necessity. Olivia's voice remained even, but her eyes hardened. While conventional doctrine was being taught in classrooms, these techniques were saving lives in environments where standard approaches failed. Convenient that they're all classified, so we have to take your word for it. Olivia had anticipated this line of attack. She reached into her flight suit pocket and removed a small flash drive, placing it on Harlow's desk. What's this? He asked, not touching it. Commander Jensen has authorized limited access to redacted operation reports for program leadership. That drive contains documentation of 17 combat missions where these integrated techniques were employed. The success rates, casualty reductions, and operational outcomes are all there, verified by command authentication. Harlow stared at the drive, his expression conflicted. Why haven't these techniques been incorporated into standard doctrine if they're so effective? It was the question at the heart of Olivia's frustration for years. Institutional inertia. Doctrinal segregation between attack and transport operations. And perhaps most significantly, the perception that transport pilots are glorified bus drivers rather than combat aviators. She held his gaze. A perception you've reinforced throughout your career, Major. The directness of her response seemed to catch Harlow off guard. He picked up the drive, turning it in his fingers thoughtfully. Review the data, Major, Olivia continued. If you still believe I'm not qualified to co-lead this program afterward, I'll request reassignment. But I suggest you consider the possibility that combat aviation effectiveness isn't defined by aircraft type, but by innovative integration of all available assets. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. One last thing, Major, the techniques I demonstrated today, they represent about 30% of what a Chinook can actually do in combat conditions. The rest will genuinely surprise you. The following days brought subtle but significant shifts in the base dynamics. Word of the Mountain Shadow exercise had spread throughout Fort Richardson, transforming perceptions of both Olivia and the Chinook's capabilities. Transport pilots who had previously kept to themselves in the shadow of the attack helicopter culture began carrying themselves with newfound confidence. Several Apache pilots sought out Olivia to discuss technical aspects of the integrated approach she had demonstrated. Simplified military story text, even the repair crews saw the change. 3 days after the training, Olivia was doing her usual checks before flying. Chief Mechanic Ortiz walked up to her. The Apache crews were asking about your Chinook's changes. Captain, he said with a smile. They couldn't believe it was a normal setup. Olivia smiled back. Did you tell them that it's all about how you fly, not special gear? Yes, ma'am. They seemed let down. Ortiz had served in Afghanistan. He had seen what skilled Chinook pilots could do. It's about time someone showed them what these helicopters can really do. Major Harlow walked over. He looked different now, less dismissive, more thoughtful. Captain Ramirez, he said. Can I talk to you? Ortiz went back to his work. Harlow led Olivia to a quiet corner of the hangar. I read the mission reports, he started. Twice, actually. Olivia waited for him to continue. The Balkans rescue in 2018. That was you, wasn't it? The pilot who went back for the lost team, even though you were ordered to leave right away. She nodded. Yes. And the night rescue during the sandstorm near Mosul, when they said it was too dangerous to fly. Also me. Harlow shook his head slowly. They taught us about that mission at advanced training. They said it was an example of when commanders need to be flexible. They never said it was a Chinook pilot who made the call. Transport stories are often changed in training materials, Olivia said calmly. Changed, Harlow repeated with a bitter laugh. That's one way to say they erased the truth. He looked straight at her. Why did you agree to work with me, Captain? After how I've treated transport pilots and you. The question surprised her. Because the program matters more than personal problems, Major. Working together saves lives and makes missions better. If my help makes those changes happen, personal stuff doesn't matter. Very focused, he seemed to be thinking about something. I've asked to see your full service record, Captain. Commander Jensen said yes this morning. Olivia tensed up. Her complete record had missions that went way beyond normal operations, that were hidden because they proved transport helicopters could do much more than people thought. Can I ask why, Major? Because if we're going to change how combat aviation works together, I need to know exactly who I'm working with. His face was serious but not mean anymore. And because after reading those first reports, I think I might have been wrong about what transport helicopters can do. It was as close to saying sorry as a squadron leader would get. Olivia knew this was a big change. I appreciate you being willing to change your mind, Major. Don't think I'm completely convinced, Captain, Harlow warned. I still have questions about whether other pilots can use these techniques. Not every transport pilot can fly like you. Not every Apache pilot can fly like you either, Major. Being excellent isn't common in any type of aircraft. But the basics can be taught, the techniques can be standardized, and working together can become normal. Harlow nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we'll see what the full record shows. He checked his watch. The advanced briefing for the joint exercise is at 2 p.m. We should get our presentation ready. As they walked to the briefing building, Olivia noticed Lieutenant Rodriguez and other pilots watching them with clear interest. Seeing Major Harlow and Captain Ramirez walking together, talking like colleagues, showed a change in the base hierarchy that was more powerful than any official announcement. Joint exercise briefing room was already full when they arrived. Pilots from both transport and attack groups sat in their usual separate clusters. Harlow saw the division right away. His eyes narrowed before he made a decision. Captain Ramirez and I will present the integrated approach together, he announced. This went against normal protocol where attack leaders presented tactical parts and transport leaders only talked about supplies. The statement, simple as it was, showed a big shift in approach. As Harlow brought up the tactical display, he didn't start with attack helicopter operations as expected. Instead, he gave an overview of how the integrated concept changed basic assumptions. Traditional doctrine separates our operations by aircraft type and mission, he explained. Attack elements secure areas before transport elements enter. This step-by-step approach has been standard since Vietnam. He paused, looking across the room. Captain Ramirez will now explain why this doctrine may be limiting our combat effectiveness. The room went silent as Olivia stepped forward. 4. A transport pilot to talk about tactical doctrine in a joint briefing had never happened before. She could sense the Apache pilots' doubt fighting with their curiosity after the rumors about the Mountain Shadow exercise. The step-by-step approach creates artificial limits, she began. It assumes transport helicopters can only work in safe environments, that their role is only about supplies rather than tactics, and that their abilities are narrowly defined by normal standards. She brought up mission data from her previously classified operations. Their security level was now temporarily cleared for the program. These operations show that working together creates force multiplication effects that step-by-step approaches can't achieve. When transport and attack elements work in coordinated patterns rather than separate phases, overall mission effectiveness increases by an average of 42%, while reducing time requirements by 35%. For the next 40 minutes, Olivia and Harlow took turns with different sections of the presentation. They created a visual representation of the integration they were proposing. The room's energy shifted as pilots from both divisions began asking questions that crossed traditional boundaries. Transport pilots asked about attack techniques, and Apache pilots showed interest in Chinook capabilities. By the end of the briefing, the rigid division that had characterized previous joint meetings had clearly softened. Pilots still stayed mostly with their squadrons, but the interaction patterns had changed. Cross-division conversations continued as they left the room. As Olivia gathered her materials, Commander Jensen approached. Good presentation, Captain. Major Harlow's participation was more enthusiastic than I expected at this stage. He's reviewed some of the operation reports, sir. I think the data is convincing, Jensen nodded. Data helps, but seeing is believing. Which is why I've arranged for a special demonstration tomorrow. He handed her a folder. We're having a distinguished visitor, Captain. Someone who specifically asked to observe your integrated techniques after hearing about the Mountain Shadow exercise. Olivia opened the folder. Her eyes widened slightly as she read the visitor details. General Calloway? The Joint Aviation Command Director? The very same. Apparently, news of our little program has reached the Pentagon, and the general has taken personal interest. Jensen's expression stayed professional, but satisfaction showed in his eyes. He'll be watching tomorrow's demonstration exercise. After that, he's requested a private meeting with both you and Major Harlow. The implications were huge. General Calloway had direct influence over combat aviation doctrine throughout all military branches. His interests suggested the ITA-P program had potential far beyond Fort Richardson. "Does Major Harlow know about this?" Olivia asked. "He's being briefed as we speak. I suggest you prepare thoroughly, Captain. This could be a pivotal moment for the future of military aviation integration." After Jensen left, Olivia stayed in the briefing room, thinking about the significance of tomorrow's demonstration. Throughout her career, she had developed techniques born of necessity in combat zones, only to see them put in classified files or dismissed as situational oddities rather than basic improvements. Now finally, she had a chance to demonstrate their value. To someone with the authority to implement systematic change, her thoughts were interrupted by Major Harlow's return. His expression was serious but no longer hostile. "You've heard about tomorrow's visitor?" he asked. "Yes, Commander Jensen just told me." Harlow leaned against the briefing table. "I knew Calloway at the War College. He's brilliant but traditional-minded. Convincing him to support doctrinal changes of this size won't be easy." "Then we'll need to make the demonstration undeniable," Olivia replied. "My thoughts exactly." Harlow hesitated, then continued. "I've been authorized to read your complete operational record, Captain. I spent last night reviewing it." His voice had lost its usual edge of condescension. "The Nuristan extraction in 2020. That was you, wasn't it?" Olivia tensed. The Nuristan operation had been her most controversial mission, one where she had directly countermanded orders from an Apache squadron leader who had deemed the extraction impossible under existing conditions. "Yes," she acknowledged cautiously. "You flew a Chinook into a mountain valley that 3 separate attack assessments had declared unsurvivable, extracted a 16-man Special Forces team under heavy fire, and developed the offset approach pattern that's now standard for high-risk extractions." "That's correct. And then you were reprimanded for insubordination rather than commended for the rescue." Harlow's tone held something new, a grudging respect tinged with discomfort. "The squadron leader who filed that reprimand was a close friend of mine. He taught at the War College when I attended." Olivia remained silent, recognizing the personal reckoning Harlow was working through. He always described that incident as a transport pilot who got lucky after disregarding tactical assessment. Harlow continued. "He never mentioned that your approach was based on specific environmental analysis that contradicted generalized doctrine but proved correct in actual conditions. Many of my techniques develop from recognizing that generalized doctrine doesn't account for specific conditions." Olivia replied carefully. "It's not about disregarding tactical assessment, but rather understanding when conventional assessment is based on limited parameters." Harlow nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to see that." He straightened, his demeanor shifting to professional focus. "For tomorrow's demonstration, I think we should showcase the canyon approach integration we discussed yesterday. It most clearly illustrates the synchronization benefits." "I agree. With your permission, I'd also like to demonstrate the extraction matrix with overlapping cover patterns." "The one from your Helmand River operation?" "That's complex coordination." "It is, but it demonstrates the principle most effectively. If we're going to convince General Calloway, we need to show him not just improved efficiency, but transformative integration." Harlow considered this, then nodded. "You're right. Let's develop the full matrix demonstration." He paused. "Captain, regardless of how tomorrow goes, I owe you an apology. I've been unnecessarily dismissive of transport capabilities and your expertise specifically." The acknowledgement caught Olivia by surprise. She had expected Harlow's resistance to continue even as they worked together, gradually diminishing through professional exposure rather than explicit recognition. I appreciate that, Major, but this isn't about individual acknowledgement. It's about creating systems that value all aviation contributions appropriately. Systems reflect the people who build them, Harlow observed, and I've been part of perpetuating a flawed perspective. He extended his hand. Tomorrow we have a chance to begin changing that. Partners in this effort? Olivia accepted the handshake. Partners. As they began planning the next day's demonstration in earnest, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From being dismissed as merely a bus driver to potentially reshaping military aviation doctrine alongside the very pilots who had once ridiculed her aircraft's capabilities. It was a transformation she hadn't dared imagine possible. Yet here they were, an Apache squadron leader and a Chinook pilot, working together to redefine what integrated combat aviation could accomplish. Tomorrow's demonstration would either cement that new vision or relegate it once again to the shadows of classified operations. Either way, the old barriers had already begun to crumble. Dawn broke over Fort Richardson with crystal clarity, the Arizona sky deepening from purple to azure as the sun crested the distant mountains. Olivia stood on the tarmac beside her Chinook, watching the base come alive with unusual energy. News of General Calloway's visit had spread rapidly, creating a buzz that transcended the traditional divisions between aviation units. She completed her pre-flight checks with methodical precision, each movement reflecting years of disciplined preparation. Today's demonstration would either validate everything she had fought for throughout her career or confirm the institutional resistance to change that had buried her innovations for years. Either way, she would fly with the same unwavering commitment to excellence that had kept her and her passengers alive through countless combat missions. Captain Ramirez. The voice behind her belonged to Commander Jensen. General Calloway's transport has landed. He'll be observing from the command center during the demonstration, then joining us for the debriefing afterward. Olivia nodded. Understood, sir. We're prepared. I know you are. Jensen's expression was uncharacteristically earnest. What you and Major Harlow have developed in just these few days has already changed perspectives on this base. Regardless of the general's reaction, remember that. As Jensen departed, Major Harlow approached, his usual confident stride now carrying a thoughtful purpose rather than arrogance. The past 24 hours had transformed their working relationship from reluctant cooperation to genuine collaboration, as they had prepared intensively for today's demonstration. Final coordination check, he said without preamble. The extraction matrix is set with 3-tier coverage patterns. Apache elements will maintain dynamic positioning rather than fixed suppression points. Confirmed, Olivia replied. The Chinook will execute the modified Helmand approach with interleaved defensive maneuvers. Altitude shifts will be progressive rather than step to maintain coverage continuity. Harlow nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. They had spent hours refining these patterns, combining Olivia's transport innovations with Harlow's attack expertise to create something truly integrated rather than merely coordinated. It's good, he affirmed. Better than good. It's revolutionary. He paused, glancing toward the command center where observers were gathering. Whatever happens today, Captain, I want you to know that working on this has fundamentally changed my understanding of combat aviation integration. The acknowledgement meant more coming from Harlow than it would have from almost anyone else. His reputation as a traditionalist made his conversion particularly significant for potential broader acceptance. Thank you, Major. That means a lot. One more thing, he added, his tone dropping slightly. I accessed the full Nuristan operation report. Read it completely. His expression had grown serious. You saved 16 lives that day with your approach. The pilot who filed that reprimand against you was wrong. I've submitted a formal statement to that effect to be added to your record." Before Olivia could respond to this unexpected vindication, Lieutenant Rodriguez approached, informing them that all pilots were assembled and ready for final briefing. The moment for personal reflection had passed, replaced by the immediate demands of the mission ahead. The pre-flight briefing was concise and focused. Unlike previous joint operations where attack and transport elements received separate instructions, today's briefing integrated all aspects of the mission. Pilots from both divisions asked questions that crossed traditional boundaries, demonstrating the subtle cultural shift already taking place. "This isn't just a demonstration for the general," Harlow concluded. "It's a new operational paradigm that each of you is helping to create. Fly like you mean it." As the pilots dispersed to their aircraft, Olivia felt a sense of culmination. Everything in her career, from her father's legacy to her own battlefield innovations, from the dismissal she had encountered to the grudging respect she had earned, all of it had led to this moment where she had the opportunity to reshape military aviation doctrine for generations to come. Shun met her at the Chinook, his expression reflecting the significance of the day. "Ready to make history, Captain?" "Just another flight, Chen," she replied with the hint of a smile. "Just happens to be one that matters." The takeoff sequence proceeded with precision. 8 Apache helicopters and Olivia's Chinook lifting into the morning sky in a formation that already reflected their integrated approach. Rather than the traditional staggered arrangement with transport trailing behind, they moved as a unified element with the Chinook positioned centrally, protected yet integral to the tactical configuration. "All units, this is Striker Lead," Major Harlow's voice came through the radio. "Proceed to initial approach point for demonstration scenario. Maintain integrated formation pattern Delta." The formation banked toward the training grounds, where a complex scenario had been prepared to showcase the capabilities of their integrated approach. Unlike standard exercises that separated combat and transport phases, this demonstration would feature simultaneous operations with overlapping requirements. Precisely the conditions where conventional doctrine faltered and their new methods excelled. As they approached the training zone, Olivia could see the elaborate setup below. Multiple objective points were marked across challenging terrain, with simulated enemy positions providing realistic opposition. The scenario was designed to force rapid adaptation and coordinated responses rather than sequential operations. "All units beginning demonstration phase 1, Harlow announced. "Striker elements, establish perimeter coverage pattern. Heavy 1, initiate approach vector for primary extraction point." "Roger, Striker Lead. Heavy 1 beginning approach." Olivia responded, guiding the Chinook into a descent path that no traditional transport protocol would have recommended. Instead of the standard high-altitude approach that would have kept the Chinook safely above potential threats, she initiated a terrain-following vector that used natural features for concealment while maintaining rapid forward movement. The massive helicopter moved with surprising agility, its dual rotors allowing maneuvers that contradicted conventional assumptions about transport limitations. "Striker elements transitioning to dynamic coverage," Harlow directed his Apache. "Units, maintain response flexibility for Heavy 1's movement pattern." What unfolded over the next 45 minutes was unlike any demonstration previously conducted at Fort Richardson. The Apache helicopters and Olivia's Chinook moved in synchronized patterns that blurred traditional role boundaries. When simulated, enemy positions targeted the transport helicopter. It didn't retreat to safety as doctrine would dictate. Instead, it adjusted its approach while Apache elements provided precisely timed suppression fire. Most dramatically, during the extraction phase, Olivia demonstrated the technique she had developed during the classified Helmand River operation, a spiraling approach that allowed the Chinook to descend into a hot landing zone while presenting a continuously changing profile to enemy targeting systems. The Apache helicopters matched this pattern with their own movement, creating overlapping fields of fire that shifted in coordination with the transport's approach. Heavy 1 touching down at Extraction Point Alpha, Olivia reported as the Chinook settled onto the designated zone, beginning simulated personnel recovery. In standard operations, this would be the most vulnerable moment, a stationary transport helicopter exposed to enemy fire. But in their integrated approach, the Apaches executed a 3-tier defensive pattern that Harlow had adapted from Olivia's combat experiences, creating concentric circles of protection that maximized coverage while minimizing their own exposure. Extraction complete, Olivia announced after the designated interval, initiating departure sequence. Rather than the vertical takeoff that would traditionally follow, she executed a rolling departure that kept the Chinook low to the ground. Before transitioning to a rapid ascent pattern coordinated with the Apache elements repositioning, the entire extraction had taken less than 2 minutes, approximately half the time required by standard protocols. All units transition to Phase 2, Harlow directed. Simulated casualty evacuation under active opposition. The second phase demonstrated even more innovative integration, with the Chinook actively participating in tactical maneuvering rather than simply being protected by the attack helicopters. When simulated enemy positions appeared unexpectedly, Olivia used the Chinook itself as a tactical element, its massive profile and rotor wash creating distractions that the Apache elements exploited with precision strikes. Throughout the demonstration, the radio communications reflected the seamless coordination they had developed, attack and transport pilots, communicating as equal tactical partners rather than segregated operational elements. The language itself had evolved, with references to integrated response patterns and synchronized movement corridors, replacing the traditional separation of combat and transport terminology. As they completed the final phase and prepared to return to base, Olivia could sense they had achieved something significant. The demonstration hadn't just showcased individual techniques. It had presented a fundamentally different vision of combat aviation integration. One where the artificial barriers between aircraft types dissolved in favor of unified operational effectiveness. All units, this is Striker Lead, Harlow's voice, carried clear satisfaction. Demonstration complete. Return to base for debriefing. Maintain formation, Echo. The flight back to Fort Richardson carried a different energy than the outbound journey. The pilots, both attack and transport, communicated with a newfound mutual respect, their exchanges reflecting the shared accomplishment of the demonstration. Even the most traditional Apache pilots offered genuine acknowledgments of the Chinook's performance and its critical role in their integrated success. As they touched down on the tarmac, Olivia completed her shutdown sequence with the same methodical precision that characterized all her operations. Through the cockpit window, she could see a group of senior officers gathered near the hangar entrance, including Commander Jensen and a distinguished figure she recognized as General Calloway. The moment of judgment had arrived. After completing their post-flight procedures, Olivia and Harlow walked together toward the debriefing building. The other pilots followed, their usual post-mission chatter subdued by awareness of the high-stakes evaluation ahead. "That was exactly what we planned," Harlow said quietly as they approached the building. "Better, actually." The synchronized extraction pattern exceeded simulation predictions for efficiency. "The Apache coverage was perfect," Olivia responded. "The tiered defensive positioning gave us maneuverability we wouldn't have had with standard suppression patterns." They entered the debriefing room to find it already occupied by senior officers and technical specialists. General Calloway sat at the center of the front row, his expression revealing nothing as the pilots filed in. Commander Jensen gestured for Olivia and Harlow to take positions at the front of the room rather than joining the seated pilots. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jensen began, "we've just witnessed the demonstration phase of the Integrated Tactical Aviation Program, Major Harlow. And Captain Ramirez will now lead the debriefing, after which General Calloway will offer his assessment. Harlow stepped forward first, bringing up the tactical display showing the mission data. What you observe today represents a fundamental reconsideration of combat aviation integration. Rather than sequential operations with distinct attack and transport phases, we demonstrated simultaneous integrated deployment, leveraging the unique capabilities of each aircraft type within a unified tactical framework. He turned to Olivia, gesturing for her to continue, a symbolic handoff that didn't go unnoticed by the observing officers. In traditional debriefings, transport pilots addressed only their specific logistical components rather than overall tactical elements. The core principle, Olivia explained, is recognizing that traditional segregation of aviation assets creates artificial limitations and operational inefficiencies. By integrating capabilities from mission planning through execution, we achieved a 47% reduction in operation timeline while increasing objective completion rates by 39% compared to standard protocols. For the next 30 minutes, they alternated presenting different aspects of the demonstration, highlighting the technical innovations and coordinated patterns that had made their approach successful. Throughout the presentation, General Calloway remained impassive, occasionally making notes but giving no indication of his assessment. As they concluded the formal debriefing, Commander Jensen turned to the general. "General Calloway, would you like to address the pilots?" The general rose slowly, his weathered features bearing the gravity of decades of military leadership. He surveyed the room before speaking, his gaze lingering momentarily on Olivia. "I've been involved in military aviation for 37 years," he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. "In that time, I've seen countless proposed innovations, doctrinal adjustments, and tactical modifications. Most represent incremental improvements at best. Occasionally, very occasionally, I witness something that fundamentally challenges existing paradigms." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "What I observed today falls into that rare category." The integration demonstrated wasn't simply a coordination of existing elements. It was a reimagining of how different aviation assets can function as a unified combat system rather than segregated operational components. The room remained absolutely silent as pilots and officers alike recognized the significance of this assessment from one of military aviation's most influential figures. "Major Harlow, Captain Ramirez," Calloway continued, "I'd like to speak with you privately. The rest of the pilots are dismissed with my commendation for excellent execution of a complex demonstration." As the room cleared, Olivia felt a curious calm. Throughout her career, moments of potential validation had often been followed by institutional resistance or bureaucratic burial of her innovations. Yet something about Calloway's initial response suggested this time might be different. When only Olivia, Harlow, Commander Jensen, and the general remained, Calloway spoke again, his tone more direct. "The Pentagon has been monitoring the development of this program with considerable interest," he revealed. "The operational data from Captain Ramirez's classified missions has been under review by our Tactical Assessment Division for several months, comparing outcomes against traditional approach metrics." This was news to Olivia. She had assumed her combat innovations remained buried in classified files, acknowledged but not seriously considered for broader implementation. "The data is compelling," Calloway continued. "In high-risk environments, the integrated techniques Captain Ramirez developed consistently outperformed standard protocols by significant margins. What we lacked was a comprehensive framework for implementing these approaches across multiple aviation elements. Your demonstration today provided exactly that framework." He turned specifically to Olivia. "Captain Ramirez, I've reviewed your complete service record, including the operations that were classified above standard access levels. The Nuristan extraction alone should have earned you a distinguished flying cross rather than a reprimand. That oversight will be corrected." The vindication was so unexpected that Olivia had to work to maintain her professional composure. After years of having her contributions minimized or overlooked, this recognition from aviation's highest levels was almost disorienting. "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice steady despite the emotions beneath it. "Don't thank me yet," Calloway replied with the hint of a smile, "because I'm about to complicate your career significantly." He looked between Olivia and Harlow. "The Pentagon is establishing a Joint Aviation Integration Task Force to develop these concepts into standardized doctrine for implementation across all military branches. We need leadership that understands both the theoretical framework and the practical application of these techniques." He paused briefly. "Major Harlow, Captain Ramirez, I'm offering you the opportunity to co-lead this task force. It would mean temporary reassignment to Pentagon aviation development, working directly with operational planning at the highest levels." The offer represented an extraordinary opportunity, the chance to reshape military aviation doctrine at its foundational level, to institutionalize the innovations that had previously been dismissed or classified into obscurity. "There's one more aspect to consider," Calloway added. "Captain Ramirez, your promotion to major has been approved, effective immediately. This task force requires equal rank structure for its leadership positions." The promotion, coming with the task force appointment, represented more than just a new rank. It was formal acknowledgement that transport pilots could achieve the same recognition and influence traditionally reserved for attack helicopter leaders. "I'm honored, sir," Olivia responded. "And I accept the assignment." "As do I," Harlow added without hesitation. "Excellent," Calloway nodded with satisfaction. "You'll receive formal orders within 48 hours. Commander Jensen has already been briefed on the transition plan for your current duties." After the general departed with Commander Jensen, Olivia and Harlow remained in the debriefing room, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Major Ramirez," Harlow said, testing the new title. "It suits you." "Thank you, Major Harlow," she replied with the hint of a smile. "Though I suspect the rank will be the least significant change in our immediate future." Reshaping decades of combat aviation doctrine from the Pentagon? Harlow shook his head with a mixture of awe and determination. "If anyone had suggested that possibility 2 weeks ago, I'd have dismissed it as fantasy." 2 weeks ago, you dismissed the possibility of a Chinook keeping pace with Apaches in tactical operations, Olivia pointed out. "True enough," he extended his hand. "Partners in this next phase?" "Partners," she confirmed, accepting the handshake. News of the demonstration results and the subsequent appointments spread throughout Fort Richardson with remarkable speed. By evening, the traditional barriers in the officers' club had dissolved as attack and transport pilots gathered together, discussing the implications of the day's events with animated enthusiasm. For the first time in her military career, Olivia found herself at the center of this integrated gathering, receiving genuine respect from pilots who had previously dismissed her role as mere logistic support. Lieutenant Rodriguez had organized an impromptu celebration of her promotion, bringing together pilots from both divisions in unprecedented camaraderie. "To Major Ramirez," he toasted, raising his glass. "Who taught us that what makes a pilot isn't the aircraft they fly, but how they fly it?" The responding cheer carried a significance beyond the moment. It represented a cultural shift that would ripple through military aviation communities worldwide. The artificial hierarchy that had placed transport pilots in perpetual secondary status was beginning to crumble, replaced by recognition of skill and contribution, regardless of aircraft type. Later that evening, Olivia stood alone on the observation deck overlooking the airfield. The silhouettes of both Apaches and Chinooks were visible in the moonlight, their distinctive profiles no longer representing separate operational worlds, but complementary elements of an integrated combat system. A voice from behind interrupted. Her reflection. Some view, isn't it? She turned to find Warrant Officer Chun, who had been her co-pilot throughout much of her combat career and the demonstration earlier that day. I was just thinking about my father, she admitted. He always said transport pilots were the backbone of combat aviation, even when no one else recognized it. Chun nodded. He'd be proud today. Not just of your promotion or the task force appointment, but of what you've done for every transport pilot who will come after you. You've changed the narrative, Major. We've changed it, she corrected. Every transport pilot who did extraordinary things while being treated as ordinary contributed to this moment. Maybe, Chun acknowledged. But it took someone willing to challenge the system directly to make it happen. That was you. As they stood watching the airfield, several pilots from both divisions joined them on the observation deck, the conversation flowing without the traditional divisions that would have separated them just days before. The change was subtle, but profound. Attack and transport pilots, discussing technical aspects of the day's demonstration as equals, each recognizing the other's unique expertise and contributions. 6 months later, Olivia stood before a gathering of military aviation leaders at the Pentagon, presenting the final recommendations of the Joint Aviation Integration Task Force. Beside her, Major Harlow operated the tactical display showing the dramatic improvement metrics their integrated approach had demonstrated in multiple test scenarios. The evidence is conclusive, she explained to the assembled generals and program directors. Integrated aviation deployment consistently outperforms traditional segregated approaches across all mission parameters. By reimagining the relationship between different aircraft types, we create force multiplication effects that exceed the sum of individual capabilities. As she outlined the specific doctrinal changes they were proposing, Olivia could see the transformation happening in real time. Senior officers who had spent decades reinforcing the traditional hierarchy now nodding in agreement with concepts that fundamentally challenge those same structures. General Calloway, who had championed their work throughout the process, rose to address the gathering as their presentation concluded. Ladies and gentlemen, what Majors Ramirez and Harlow have presented isn't merely a tactical adjustment, it's a paradigm shift in how we conceptualize combat aviation. Their work will form the foundation of our new Joint Combat Aviation Doctrine, to be implemented across all service branches effective immediately. The announcement represented everything Olivia had worked for throughout her career. Official recognition that the artificial barriers between aircraft types limited operational effectiveness and that true excellence came from integration rather than segregation. As the meeting concluded, Olivia found herself surrounded by senior officers offering congratulations and support for the new doctrine. The same military establishment that had once buried her innovations in classified files now embraced them as the future of combat aviation. Later that day, she and Harlow stood in their shared Pentagon office, reviewing the implementation timeline for their doctrinal changes. It's really happening, Harlow observed with quiet satisfaction. Every combat aviation unit will be training with these integrated protocols within 6 months. And every transport pilot will have the opportunity to contribute as a tactical asset rather than just logistical support, Olivia added. All because one Chinook pilot refused to accept artificial limitations, Harlow noted with newfound respect. You know, I still remember what I said when you were first assigned to the Silverback operation, something about furniture delivery versus real combat flying. Olivia smiled. As I recall, you suggested I might slow down the real pilots. One of many things I've been wrong about in my career, he acknowledged. But learning from those mistakes has made me a better officer and a better pilot. Their conversation was interrupted by a young lieutenant delivering a document requiring their review. As he handed over the folder, his expression revealed unmistakable admiration. Major Ramirez, he said hesitantly, I just wanted to say, I'm a transport pilot in training. What you've done, changing how we're integrated into combat operations. It matters, thank you. After he departed, Harlow shook his head with a smile. You've become something of a legend among the transport pilot community, you know. The Chinook pilot who transformed military aviation doctrine. It was never about recognition, Olivia replied.